All right, so here we are. We've got Scream 7. And look, before we start throwing knives at this thing, I want to just say it up front. This movie's not terrible. It's watchable. It's got moments. There are pieces in there that absolutely feel like Scream. But man, this movie runs on plot armor and convenience gasoline. And after a while, you can feel the machinery turning. And that's where things start to wobble. Now, first, the positives, because there are some. Right away, the movie gets one thing very right: the sound of Scream. The classic Scream score, the musical stings, and the little orchestral hits when Ghostface shows up. It feels like a Scream movie in your ears, even when it's not really, even though it has made some strange choices. And they also bring back a couple things that fans are going to really clock, such as the use of the Red Right Hand song from the original movie. It's been part of the DNA of the franchise forever. And hearing it again, it's like a little signal flare. It says, okay, we're still in the Scream universe. Another thing I actually liked, and it's a little different, is the idea that the killer uses fire as a murder weapon. Now, I don't remember that happening before. That's a new wrinkle for Ghostface. Usually it's on knives and chase scenes, but the fire introduces a little different threat. It's kind of cool. Speaking of nods, there's a fun background detail where the town theater marquee, they are playing Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That kind of thing is classic Scream. Or references baked right into the scenery. You also get a return in some form from Stu and Dewey, which fans will definitely react to. I know I thought it was really cool. So whether it fully works is another question, but seeing those characters acknowledged again does carry some nostalgic weight. And it was also nice to see Joel McHale playing like a straight man in this. He's not clowning around. So it's odd, but it was cool that they got him for this. So moving on, I'm gonna jump around. I got a couple of kills popped in there. I'll just mention one of the kills. I'm gonna call it the pinata kill, which you'll see. I thought that was very cool. It's gruesome, weirdly inventive. All right, the filmmakers still know how to stage a memorable beat. So, but again, it's not like it wasn't out of ideas. Some of the problem is that a lot of the ideas feel forced or convenient. So we'll talk about plot armor a little. Early on, there's a moment that perfectly sums up the movie's weird tone. A teenage boy picks up two girls in his car, and he's acting like a wildly horny teenager naturally, completely over the top. But the first thing he insists on, hey, buckle up. Now look, seatbelt safety is great. I'm all for that, but it's just a strange, sanitized moment that kind of pulls you out of the scene. Feels like the movie's trying to have it both ways. And that kind of thing happens a few times. There's this big sequence during they're rehearsing the school play, all in dress for some reason. I'm not sure they do that, but the theater department there has an entire system of professional aerial rigging and harnesses and people flying through the air like Cirque du Soleil or something. High school kids running Broadway level stunt rigs. It's the kind of thing where you just sit there and think, okay, sure. Then there's that in that dress rehearsal scene later, the theater just everybody leaves, just goes dark, everybody's gone. And I guess it's supposed to feel tense, but instead it feels like the movie just kind of cleared everybody out so the killer can just move in and get to it. Brings us to one of the bigger ongoing problems. The movie rarely earns its tension. Things just sort of happen because the story needs them to. For example, there were many times where a phone call would have ended all this, but I get it. They have to have continuity, but it would have changed the flow of events. The movie just ignores the absence of them. And it doesn't try to write them out. They write the phones out like they lose the phone. Characters, they conveniently just arrive and disappear. Information just appears exactly when someone needs it. Then there are the characters that die in the movie that nobody bothers to set up. But the blonde girl I mentioned before, who you may recognize from from Young Sheldon, and then a stagehand, like one of the other kids. They're killed, but the audience has no emotional investment in them. We barely know who they are. It's just bodies for the count, and another kind of strange piece, it involves Sydney's daughter, Tatum. The movie mentions her birth, and by the way, the girl was also in Young Sheldon, but they never explain Sydney's marriage. When were the kids born? How did she and her husband meet? Like none of that. It just creates this weird gap in the story. I start to wonder about all these details that the movie never answers. So maybe it got cut out. And since we're talking about Sydney, our hero, here's the question that never gets asked. Why did she never change her name? This woman has survived multiple attempts on her life, all these murder sprees, Ghostface killers popping up out of nowhere. And she's still walking around publicly with the name Sydney. Same hair, same haircut, same everything. No attempt at all. So at a certain point, it just feels like a kind of franchise convenience. And then you have the police investigation, or what passes for one. There's a scene where the police come in and they sweep her house looking for the killer, right? To check the room, they check all over the place, and somehow nobody looks in the attic. The attic. The place horror movies have been hiding killers since the 40s, and apparently nobody thought to check it. So it's that kind of movie logic at times. And speaking, the police presence overall, it's almost non-existent. This town is a curfew. The kids are being killed, but you never see officers patrolling the streets, checking buildings, or looking around any of the controlled or so-called controlled areas. It feels like the world only exists when the main characters are on screen. So, and then when you get to the final act, look, Sydney, Super Sid shows up again. Okay, she saved her husband a couple times, who's like a big cop. Which, all right, she's the hero of the franchise, but the level of plot protection around her, it's so obvious at that point. There's also a very strange sequence where a group of teens allow themselves to be gathered together by Gail Weathers' crew, even though they barely know them. By the way, no hate, but Courtney Cox looks 100 years old, and she's terrible in this. They give her terrible lines. She's not funny at all. So anyway, all these people just decide to assemble like they're lifelong friends, and just another convenience. In fact, speaking of Gail, she gets a very rough moment in her big entrance going back to the beginning. Just a cheesy, unfunny line. It's just not good. So getting back to the finale, it turns into this almost clownish girl fight standoff with the characters swearing at each other. A lot of female swearing in this. It's just so forced and it's just lame. Which brings me to something else. A lot of the dialogue is very WB, very kind of meta, kind of group talk energy. Characters explaining horror tropes, talking about themselves like they're in a movie, which was clever in the original Scream, all right? But here, it sometimes feels like the movie is imitating its own reputation. So where does that leave us? Scream 7 definitely has some pieces that work. The music works, some of the kills work, the horror nods definitely work. But the story, it's built on so many conveniences and bubbles around the main characters, and it's hard to fully invest. It's not a disaster, but it's a movie that could have been much sharper if it trusted the audience and its own world a little bit more. And that's my cut. Okay, so if you enjoyed this and my other breakdowns, instead of the Hollywood Hype Machine, please consider subscribing to the Macho Cut, because around here, just watching movies, we cut into them. So that's going to do it today. We will see you down the road there. Adios. Later. Bye.